Garrett Cole never should have walked into that ballroom. But when your 7-year-old daughter wins a scholarship to a fancy private school and they invite you to the donor gala, you show up even if your only suit is from a thrift store and your shoes are scuffed. "Dad, are you sure we belong here?" Sophie whispered, tugging at his hand as they stepped into the glittering event space of the Westlake Grand Hotel. He squeezed her little hand. "They invited us, didn't they?" Chandeliers sparkled overhead, violins played softly in the corner, and men in perfectly tailored tuxedos sipped champagne like they were born holding crystal flutes. Garrett adjusted his tie too tight and cleared his throat. A woman in a red dress approached them with a clipboard. "Mr. Cole," Garrett straightened. "Yeah," she smiled politely. "Right this way, Miss Camden is expecting you," he blinked. Okay." They were led through the crowd like they belonged there. Sophie clutched her small purse, eyes wide with wonder. Garrett's heart thudded. He'd planned to stay near the back, thank whoever paid for his daughter's scholarship, and go home. He didn't expect to be seated at the main table. He didn't expect to meet her. She was standing at the far end of the room, talking to a group of sharply dressed men. Tall, elegant, with black heels that probably cost more than his rent, and a sleek emerald jumpsuit that made her look like she stepped out of a fashion ad. Elara Camden. She turned when the event assistant gestured toward her. Garrett's breath caught. She didn't smile like the others. She didn't fake interest. She looked at him like she hadn't seen someone real in a long time. "You're Garrett Cole?" she asked, walking toward him. He nodded, trying not to feel out of place. "I expected someone older," she said. "I get that a lot," he joked. "Being a single dad kind of aged me in reverse." Her eyes flicked to Sophie. "This must be the brilliant Sophie Cole," Sophie beamed. "Yes, ma'am." Elara knelt down to her level. "I read your essay. You write better than some of the people I pay to write for me." Sophie giggled, and Elara stood again, turning back to Garrett. "She's the reason you're here." "We're grateful," Garrett said, trying to ignore how stunning she was up close. "This school. We never could have afforded it." Elara motioned to a waiter. "Let's get you two seated." The night blurred after that. Wine glasses clinked, the headmaster gave a speech, and Garrett found himself seated beside Elara, who didn't talk like someone rich. She teased. She asked real questions. She listened. "So what do you do, Garrett?" she asked during the main course. "I'm a mechanic," he said. "Own a small shop in Eastwood." She raised an eyebrow. "You own it?" "Yeah, small place, mostly trucks and older cars." "I fix things people forget about." Something flickered in her expression. "That's rare." "What, grease under the fingernails?" "No," she said softly. "People who care about what they fix." Garrett didn't know what to say to that, so he looked down at his plate. The steak was cooked perfectly. Sophie was happily working on her second dessert, chatting with one of the teachers. For once, she wasn't the girl with hand-me-downs and a lunch box from the dollar store. Tonight, she was just a kid, happy and curious and full of bright ideas. "Look," he said, turning to Elara, "I know I don't belong here. I'm not one of your donors. I didn't come to. I mean, I don't expect anything else." She tilted her head. "Who told you you didn't belong?" He hesitated. "Nobody." "But I can do the math." "I'm not interested in the math," she said, her voice low. "I'm interested in you." That stopped him cold. "Elara, I host these things every year," she cut in. "I meet a lot of men who want things from me. You're not one of them." "That's rare." "I'm not trying to impress you." "Good," she said, "because you already did." He didn't know what to say to that. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Elara introduced him to people like he was someone important. She laughed at his dry humor. She asked about Sophie, about his shop, about his life, and when the gala ended, she walked them out herself. "Let me get my driver to take you home," she offered. Garrett shook his head. "We took the bus, we're good." "In those shoes?" she asked, glancing down at Sophie's flats. "No way." A sleek black car pulled up before he could argue. Elara opened the back door herself, helping Sophie in, then she turned to him. "I'd like to see you again, Garrett." He blinked. "You mean like a date?" She grinned. "Yes." "Like a date." He stared at her, trying to process what was happening. "Elara, you're the CEO of Camden Innovations." "Yes, you're worth." He trailed off. "Too much," she said. "And none of it matters when I'm talking to you." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't have a suit." "I can't afford those places." "Then I'll come to your side of town," she said simply. "I don't care where we eat. Garrett stared at her, this woman who had everything and for some insane reason wanted to spend time with him. "Okay," he said finally. "Yeah, let's go on a date," she smiled. "I'll call you." "I don't have a business card," he said. She reached into her clutch, pulled out a pen, and gently took his hand. She wrote her number on his palm. "I'll wait for your call," she said. Then she stepped back and the car door closed. As the car drove off with Sophie asleep against his shoulder, Garrett leaned his head back and exhaled. He had no idea what just happened. But somehow, a man who fixed old trucks and packed peanut butter sandwiches for school lunches had caught the attention of a billionaire. And she wanted a second look. Garrett stood staring at his reflection in the cracked mirror above the sink in his shop's tiny bathroom, his palm still faintly ink-stained from where she'd written her number the night before. He'd washed his hands 5 times since, but the numbers clung to his skin like a dare. He was still trying to make sense of everything. The bell on the garage door jingled. "Dad," Sophie called, poking her head inside. "Mr. Lewis is here for the oil change." Garrett wiped his hands on a rag and stepped out. "Hey, George, you're early. Just wanted to beat the heat," the older man said, handing over the keys. "You all right? You look like you saw a ghost." Garrett didn't answer. How was he supposed to explain that a woman who probably had her face on the cover of Forbes had asked him out? He waved it off and got to work. By late afternoon, Sophie sat cross-legged on a blanket in the corner of the garage, drawing her imaginary future dog in crayons, while Garrett lay under the car, pretending he wasn't thinking about Elara Camden. "Dad," she said suddenly, "are you going to call her?" He slid out from under the car. "Who?" Sophie rolled her eyes. "The pretty lady from last night," Garrett laughed. "You think she's pretty? She looks like she could be in one of those movies where the lady saves the world and wears sunglasses at night." He raised an eyebrow. "That's oddly specific." She was nice. "You smiled more than usual." Garrett sat beside her, wiping grease from his hands. "She's not exactly from our world, Soph. She liked you anyway," she said simply. "That means something." He didn't respond. Instead, he pulled out his phone, stared at it, then shoved it back into his pocket. But by the time the sun dipped low and the garage lights buzzed on, he found himself dialing. The call rang once, twice. "Garrett Cole," came her voice, smooth and amused. "I was beginning to think you lost my number." "I almost did," he said. "Literally? I'm glad you didn't," he cleared his throat. "You still want that date?" "I do," she said, no hesitation. "Are you free tomorrow night?" He blinked. "Tomorrow, I'm not a planner," she said. "I like surprises." Garrett glanced at his calendar. "I close the shop at 6. "Sophie, bring her," she said before he could finish. "It's not a date if I don't get to see both of you." He paused. "You sure?" "Positive. 7 o'clock, I'll send a driver." He hesitated again. "I'm not exactly a tuxedo kind of guy." "Perfect," she said. "I'm not looking for one." The line went dead before he could say anything else. The next night, the car that pulled up outside their building wasn't the same as the one from the gala. This one was sleeker, darker. The driver wore white gloves and called Garrett sir, which made Sophie giggle all the way to the restaurant. They pulled up in front of a place Garrett had only seen once on the cover of a travel magazine in a waiting room. It wasn't a restaurant. It was a rooftop garden built above a high rise, with glass walls and hanging lanterns that shimmered like stars. Elara was already there. She stood beside a long table under a blooming pergola, wearing a cream-colored blouse tucked into dark slacks, her hair swept back in a way that made her look like she belonged on a movie poster. Not flashy, not overdone, just effortless. "I hope you're hungry," she said as they approached. "I had the chef make a few things." Sophie's eyes widened as she took in the table, plates of tiny, perfect food that looked like it belonged in a painting. "This is real," she whispered. "This is dinner," Elara said, pulling out a chair for her. Garrett sat down slowly, still adjusting to the view. Skyscrapers in every direction, the city glowing beneath them, and Elara across the table looking at him like he wasn't just a guy who fixed engines and scraped by. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. "I wanted to," she replied. "I like making things memorable." Sophie leaned in. "Do you own this place?" Elara laughed. "No, but I know the owner. He owed me a favor." Garrett raised an eyebrow. "What kind of favors get you a rooftop garden for dinner?" The kind you collect after helping someone out of a six-figure lawsuit, she said with a shrug. He blinked. You're not intimidating at all, she poured him a drink. Good, I'm trying to keep things casual. They ate. Sophie asked questions about the view, the food, the waiters with earpieces, and Elara answered each one like she wasn't the guest of honor at half the world's elite events. Garrett mostly listened, trying to understand how she carried herself so lightly despite the weight of everything she clearly handled. She didn't brag. She didn't need to. It was in the way the staff moved around her, the way people paused when she spoke. Halfway through the meal, she turned to Garrett. I meant what I said. You impressed me. He met her gaze. Why? You're not afraid to tell the truth. You don't try to be someone you're not. Most people I meet are always performing. He watched her for a moment. And you're not performing now, she considered that. Not with you. Sophie had wandered to the edge of the garden to look at the lights. Garrett leaned closer. This doesn't make sense, he said quietly. You could have anyone. I don't want just anyone. You don't know me. I'm getting to know you. He studied her. Are you doing this because you feel sorry for us? Her expression changed instantly. Do you think I pity you? I don't know, he admitted. It's just this world of yours. It's not made for people like me. She stood, walked around the table, and sat beside him. I didn't grow up in this world either, Garrett. I built it, and I'm allowed to invite whoever I want into it. He didn't answer. She reached into her bag and handed him a small, worn book. This was mine when I was Sophie's age. It's about a girl who built a bridge out of broken things. Garrett looked down at the cover. Why give this to me? Because you know how to fix what's broken, she said. And I think you've been doing that a long time even when no one noticed. He stared at the book. I don't know what this is, he said finally. This. Then let's find out, she said softly. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people who met by accident. He looked over at Sophie, who was spinning in slow circles under the lanterns, her laughter echoing off the glass. All right, he said. Let's see where it goes. Garrett had never been to a private charity polo match before, but when Elara asked if Sophie liked horses and then personally arranged for the three of them to attend, he hadn't known how to say no. He stood awkwardly near the edge of the green, watching men in crisp white uniforms gallop past on horses worth more than his entire block. Sophie leaned against the railing, her eyes wide with fascination as she followed every movement of the game. Elara stood beside her, sunglasses perched on her head, pointing things out with a quiet smile. I didn't even know this sport had rules, Garrett said, folding his arms. Elara turned to him. It doesn't. The goal is to look sophisticated while chasing a ball on horseback and pretending you're not sunburned. He laughed, catching the eyes of a few sharply dressed guests nearby who clearly weren't used to seeing someone in worn jeans and a short-sleeved button-down at an event like this. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one here who drove a truck held together by duct tape, he muttered. You're definitely the only one here who didn't have their shoes polished before arriving, Elara replied, leaning in a little. Which is probably why I like you more than everyone else. Sophie turned around. Can I go see the stables when the match is over? Garrett hesitated. I don't know if we're allowed back there. Elara gestured toward one of the staff. Tell James I said it's fine. He'll show you around. Sophie lit up and ran off, Elara watching her go with a faint look of longing that Garrett hadn't seen before. She fits in better than I do, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. She's curious. That's different than fitting in. He looked at her. Why do you keep inviting us places like this? Elara took off her sunglasses and held his gaze. Because I don't want to just date you in the shadows. I'm not interested in hiding. You don't think people talk? He asked. You're standing next to a grease-stained single dad whose idea of fine dining is a food truck with 2 health code stickers. She shrugged. Let them talk. I've spent too much of my life making decisions to please board members. You don't think this could affect your reputation? She leaned closer. It already has, and you know what? The only people who care are the ones who never mattered in the first place. He studied her. You mean that, Elara? Came a voice to their right. A tall man in an ivory blazer approached them. His jaw was too sharp, his handshake too smooth. Didn't expect to see you out here today, he said, eyeing Garrett like he was a misplaced chair. Elara's expression cooled. "Hello, Miles. New company?" Miles asked, glancing at Garrett's faded shirt. Garrett offered a short nod. "Garrett Cole." Miles didn't offer his name in return. "You're from Eastwood, right?" he said, as if it were a diagnosis. "That's right." Miles turned back to Elara. "We're still on for dinner next Thursday?" "No," she said plainly. "I canceled." Miles blinked. "You did?" "I'm seeing someone," she said, her voice level. Miles gave Garrett another once-over. Interesting choice. Garrett's jaw tightened, but Elara stepped forward before he could respond. "Walk away, Miles." The man raised his hands in mock surrender and disappeared into the crowd. Garrett exhaled slowly. "Friend of yours, ex-fiancé," she said. "From a lifetime ago. You don't have to explain." "I know," she said. "But I want to." They wandered away from the crowd, past the edge of the field where the noise of the announcer faded. Elara removed her heels, walking barefoot across the trimmed grass. "I was supposed to marry him," she said, looking straight ahead. 2 years ago. It was a merger disguised as a relationship. My father approved, our families matched on paper, but I couldn't do it. I called it off a month before the wedding. Garrett hesitated. "That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," she said. "I lost investors, lost a few board seats. But I didn't want to wake up next to someone who made me feel like a business transaction." He was quiet for a moment. "You ever regret it?" "Not for a second." They stopped near a bench under a trimmed olive tree. Garrett sat beside her, elbows on his knees. "I've been thinking," he said slowly. "This thing between us, it's not just a fling, is it?" She shook her head. "It's not. I'm not used to this. The attention, the press, everything about your world moves too fast." She reached over and took his hand. "Then we slow it down. We make our own rules." He looked at her fingers wrapped in his, the contrast of oil-stained hands and pale polish. "Promise me something," he said. "Anything. If this gets hard and don't shut me out. Don't make decisions for me just because you think it'll protect me." She studied him. "You think I'd do that? I think you've had to make a lot of hard choices alone. I just don't want to be one of them." Elara nodded slowly. "I won't. But you have to promise me something too." "What's that?" "When things get messy and don't assume I'm going to run." He met her eyes. "Deal." They sat in silence, the wind shifting through the branches above them. In the distance, Sophie's laughter echoed from the stables. Elara leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. "You know," she said, "you never asked why I started the scholarship fund in the first place." Garrett glanced at her. "Why did you?" "Because when I was 12, my mother filled out an application for a music camp I didn't qualify for. We couldn't afford it. We got rejected. But someone anonymous paid my way anyway. I still don't know who. That experience changed everything for me." He was quiet. "I always said," she continued, "if I ever got to a place where I could help someone like that, I'd do it. And then I met Sophie." Garrett swallowed. "You helped her before you knew either of us." "I didn't need to know her," she said. "I just believed in her." Garrett turned his face toward the sky, eyes closed. Maybe this wasn't about fitting in. Maybe it was about belonging someplace unexpected, with someone even more surprising. Garrett adjusted the collar of his pressed shirt as the elevator doors opened to the top floor of Camden Tower. The skyline stretched in every direction, the floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city in shimmering gold as sunset bled across the glass. He stepped out slowly, feeling the weight of the moment. Sophie was at home with Mrs. Tran from the corner bakery, who had all but demanded to babysit the moment she heard why he needed the evening free. Garrett had shaved, worn the jacket Elara had left hanging on his shop door with a note that simply said, "No pressure, just presence." He hadn't known how to answer that. Not with words, anyway. A soft melody floated through the hallway piano keys, low and warm, and he followed it. Elara stood in the center of a private lounge lined with bookshelves, and a baby grand piano tucked into the corner, her back to him, barefoot on the polished wood floor. Her hair was down for the first time he'd seen it, falling over one shoulder in loose waves. She wore a soft gray blouse and dark slacks, not silk, not statement-making, just her, and somehow that hit harder than any gala dress ever could. "I didn't expect the piano," Garrett said. "I don't usually play for anyone else," she replied, still facing the window. "Why now?" "Because I wanted you to hear who I used to be." He stepped closer, the city lights flickering to life behind her reflection. "You're not trying to impress me tonight," he said. She turned. "I stopped trying the moment you looked at me like I was a person, not a headline." Garrett exhaled. "You always do this. Take the wind out of me." "I'm not trying to," she said lightly. "You just keep showing up real in a world that's mostly mirrors." He walked to the couch, sitting slowly. "So why bring me here? I wanted you to see my world on my terms. No cameras, no photographers, no catered rooftop theatrics. Just us," he said. "Just us." Elara sat beside him, folding her legs under her. For a moment, there was only silence between them. "You've been quiet all week," she said gently. "I've been thinking about," he rubbed his palms together, "about what happens if this goes deeper. People will start asking questions. Sophie already has. I'm not going to be able to protect her from the noise if this becomes public." "She's not the one who needs protection," Elara said. "You are." He looked at her, startled. "You think I haven't seen what they write," she continued. "The speculation, the headlines creeping in, I can stop them for now. But not forever." Garrett leaned forward. "I don't care what they say about me, but the second they start dragging Sophie's name into it." "They won't," Elara said firmly. "Not if I make this official." His brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" She stood, walked to the corner, and returned with something in her hand, a small navy blue envelope, sealed with gold. "This is my invitation to the International Philanthropy Summit next week," she said. "It's in Monaco. I'm expected to attend with a partner." He blinked. "Monaco?" She handed him the envelope. "If I walk in with you, there's no more speculation, no more whispering about who you are. You'll be standing beside me, publicly, without apology." Garrett stared at the envelope. "That's not just a date, Elara. That's a declaration." "I know." He looked up at her. "You're sure?" "I am," she said. "But I won't force you. If this isn't what you want, if the idea of stepping into that world makes you feel like you're losing your footing, I'll understand." He stood, holding the envelope without opening it. "You want the truth, always." "I'm terrified," he admitted. "I don't know how to walk in rooms like that. I've spent years building something steady for Sophie, quiet, safe. This is the opposite of that." "And yet," she prompted softly. He looked at her, his voice low. "I want to try. Not because of the trip, not because of the lights, because of you." She stepped closer. "Then let me meet you halfway." He raised an eyebrow. "How?" "I already made the arrangements," she said, "but I didn't book a hotel suite. I booked a cottage on the edge of the coast, private, quiet. It has a workbench out back, and enough space for Sophie to run wild." Garrett laughed under his breath. "You really planned a billionaire summit around a mechanic and his daughter." "I planned it around the man who made me feel like myself again." His heart thudded. "Elara," he said, "you realize you're making it impossible to walk away, right?" "I'm not asking you to walk," she whispered. "I'm asking you to stay." He reached for her hand, the envelope still in his other. "Then let's go to Monaco," he said. "Let's show them exactly where we stand." 3 days later, Garrett stood in a tailored suit, still not used to the fit on the tarmac of a private airfield. Sophie bounced beside him, her backpack covered in patches, her eyes wide as the jet came into view. "She's beautiful," Sophie exclaimed, pointing at the plane. "She really is," Garrett murmured, but his eyes weren't on the aircraft. Elara descended the steps in a cream coat, her hair caught by the wind. She looked across the tarmac and smiled, not the kind she gave to investors or press or board members. This smile was just for him. When she reached them, she knelt to Sophie's level. "Ready for an adventure, always," Sophie grinned. They boarded together, the hum of the engines rising beneath their feet, the leather seats soft and waiting. Elara sat beside Garrett, their knees brushing. Sophie sprawled across the seat opposite them, flipping through a travel magazine. As the plane lifted off, Garrett turned to Elara. "I don't know where this ends," he said. "I do," she replied. He raised an eyebrow. "With you, with Sophie, with us." He placed his hand over hers, steady and certain. "For the first time," he said, "I believe that." Outside the window, the clouds parted. Above them was a world neither of them had ever dreamed of sharing. But they weren't dreaming anymore. They were flying toward it together. The villa on the cliffs of Roquebrune Cap Martin overlooked the Mediterranean like a secret it never intended to share. The sun had just begun to set, casting a honeyed glow over the terrace where Garrett stood, sleeves rolled, hands braced against the stone balustrade. Waves lapped below in a steady rhythm, and the breeze carried the scent of rosemary and sea salt. Inside, Elara moved between the kitchen and the living room, barefoot on the tiled floor, a linen apron tied casually at her waist. A tray of fresh bread and roasted olives rested on the table. Sophie sat nearby, cross-legged with a sketchpad, drawing a horse she'd seen that morning during their visit to the nearby stables. Garrett turned when he heard her laugh light, unguarded, the kind of sound he hadn't realized he'd missed until it became part of his everyday. "Elara," he called softly. She looked up. "I've been thinking about what happens when we go back." She folded the apron over the back of a chair and walked outside, joining him by the railing. "You're worried." "I'm not used to being seen," he said. "Not like that." "Yesterday at the summit, people took pictures, asked questions I wasn't ready for." "They'll lose interest," Elara said. "They always do." He turned to her. "But we won't. You and me, we're not just a moment, and I need to know you're in this for the long haul." "Not just until the press moves on." She didn't hesitate. "I'm not planning on moving on, Garrett." He studied her for a moment. "Then let's stop pretending we're trying this. I don't want to keep calling it new or temporary or unexpected." Elara's expression softened. "What do you want to call it instead?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught not because of the gesture, but because of what it meant. "I don't have a speech," he said. "And this probably isn't how you pictured it. But I've never been more certain about anything in my life." She opened the box slowly. Inside was a simple platinum ring, no diamonds, no grandeur, just honest metal forged to last. "I'm not asking for a wedding tomorrow. I'm asking if we can build something real. No timelines, no press releases." "Just us?" Elara's eyes didn't well up. They steadied, anchored by something deeper than surprise. She took the ring out and slipped it onto her finger. "It's perfect," she said. "And yes, 100 times yes." Sophie appeared at the doorway, holding her sketch pad. "Are you guys getting married?" Garrett looked at her, then back at Elara. "Eventually, if that's okay with you," Sophie grinned. "Only if I get to be the flower girl." Elara reached for her. "You'll be more than that. You'll be part of everything." That night, they ate on the terrace by candlelight. No staff, no photographers. Just the three of them, passing plates, trading stories, and laughing under the stars so vividly they seemed to lean closer just to listen. When they returned to the States a week later, the headlines followed, but Elara no longer flinched at them. Garrett walked beside her at every function, hand in hers. Sophie started at her new school with a confidence that came from being seen, not for what she had, but for who she was. Months passed. The garage stayed open, but now had a second bay, a gift from Elara, disguised as a strategic investment, though the paperwork listed Garrett as the sole owner. Every Friday, she picked up Sophie from school and brought her to the shop, even if it meant sitting on an overturned milk crate with her tablet while Garrett worked. They didn't rush to the altar. They built something better weekends in the countryside, Sunday mornings with pancakes and newspaper crossword puzzles, evenings spent fixing up an old motorcycle together, one piece at a time. One spring morning, Garrett drove to the school assembly where Sophie was being honored for her writing. He stood at the back of the auditorium, hands in pockets, as she walked across the stage. Elara sat beside him, fingers brushing his, a quiet reminder that this life was no longer borrowed. After the ceremony, Sophie ran into their arms. "I want to write about us," she said. "About how things can change even when you think they won't." Garrett looked at Elara. "She gets that from you." "No," Elara said, wrapping an arm around them both. "She gets that from us." That evening, back at their home, a renovated craftsman house they'd chosen together on the edge of the city, Garrett stood in the kitchen, stirring sauce while Sophie set the table. Elara entered, holding a small white envelope. He turned. "What's that?" "It's from the foundation," she said. "They want to name the newest scholarship after someone." He raised an eyebrow. "Please tell me it's not me," she smiled. "It's not, it's Sophie." Sophie gasped, nearly dropping a fork. "Really, you inspired it," Elara said. "You opened a door. Now it's your name on the key." Garrett pulled her close, pressing his lips to her temple. Later that night, with Sophie asleep and the windows open to the spring breeze, Garrett lay beside Elara, one arm under her, the other tracing idle patterns along her spine. You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't gone to that gala? He asked. No, she whispered. Why not? Because we did go, she said, and nothing else matters. He kissed her slow and certain, and as the night deepened, silence wrapped around them, not empty but full. Full of decisions made and futures claimed. Full of a love that had never asked to be extraordinary but became it anyway.